Hi, I'm Jean Wesley, Vice President of Workforce for Germanna Community College. And I'm here today with Christine Goodwin, entrepreneur extraordinaire.
Oh, thanks.
And founder of Wish Stars and co-founder of Fred Exchange. And we're here to talk about entrepreneurship.
One of my favorite topics.
So, Christine, what is an entrepreneur?
So that's an interesting question. Definition, strict definition, is anybody who basically creates a business, usually at great financial risk, right? So this is not a person of means investing in an enterprise that is already well funded and going along swimmingly. This is somebody who has an idea, usually no money, and a lot of sort of stubborn obstinance to make that idea become something that can generate revenue. And I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about what an entrepreneur looks like and how they get the job done.
They look like rich white people, right?
They look
men.
They look a lot like guys.
Rich white men.
They look a lot.
Do they
like
look a little
guys.
nerdy?
They not always. Some of them are kind of good looking, but they look a lot like guys. And interestingly enough, and this is actually a really good, I think, segue into sort of the mythology that's created around entrepreneurship. They look a lot like guys. Many of them older. So there's this myth that your average entrepreneur in the United States especially is some college-age dropout, usually from an Ivy League school or some school of note, who has grown up in an upper middle class upbringing, if not greater, has access to lots of resources, convinces a couple of their buddies to create an app, which is usually ultimately behind all of it is this desire to get the girl, right? And then they launch it into the web of things on the internet and become billionaires overnight. And the reality is that the core of entrepreneurs around the world are very different from that.
Are you sure, Christine? Because I've seen it that way in the movies.
Yeah, so there's a difference between the movie and reality. And unfortunately, we don't celebrate the reality enough. We don't celebrate the actual life of real people who, against a lot of odds, usually without a lot of support, especially in the beginning, bring a concept to fruition and become this, not only a revenue generator, but they create jobs for people. In some cases, they revolutionize an existing industry, or they create a whole new market and change the world.
In IT, right?
No.
No?
No. So another myth about entrepreneurship is that it's all tech-based, so that if you aren't creating an app or creating some capability that runs on the internet, you're not an entrepreneur. And that does a huge disservice to the bulk of the entrepreneurs around the world who, interestingly enough, many of them are women. Many of them are women of color and from very disadvantaged economic situations who start an enterprise usually to take care of their family. In some cases because they have no other means of income but to do it themselves. But the average entrepreneur in the United States is a small business owner in a community. And the backbone of this country economically depends on those entrepreneurs, and we don't celebrate them enough either. We very much disregard them as having any merit, much less impact, when in fact, without them, our economy would collapse.
So you're saying there are entrepreneurs right here in the Germanna region?
They are everywhere, and it's there are 300 million people in the United States, and roughly 30 million of them are entrepreneurs. Right, so 10% of the American population is entrepreneurial, and most of them don't look like Mark Zuckerberg, like at all. And I'm not knocking the way the guy looks, but they are people with families. In some cases, they're people who live in highly disadvantaged regions, or they live in areas like ours where we're in the hub of lots of things going on, and they want to do something that they own, that they create, and that they bring into the world. And that can be being a pizza parlor. It can be running a medical device delivery service. It can be home health care aides and nurses and a business around helping the elderly. It can be tutoring for students who have learning disabilities. It can be a high-tech enterprise. Right? It can be all of these things. It is not just one thing. And I think the part that pains me a lot when we're meeting people in our community who are interested in entrepreneurship is that they think it's not for them because of what they see in the media. So we have to change that.
What you're saying is anybody can do it.
No, I don't think anybody can do it. So, I think the hard part about being an entrepreneur no matter what type of enterprise you want to start up, is that you're going against incredible odds, and you don't always have the support you need. And sometimes it's your family who loves you, but they can't quite get their head around it, and it feels very risky. So there's a lot of aversion to risk. You know, your average entrepreneur in the United States, it runs between 35 and 45 years of age, which means they have families, they have obligations that they want to honor to their family. They also have experience in the world, right? Like they have work experience, they have life experience, and they're obsessed and compulsively obsessed with making this thing happen. And that usually doesn't bode very well for the status quo of your life. So it might mean that you leave your day job, or you're hot-footing it between day job for a certain amount of time, family, and then every spare minute that you get working on a startup. And there's a lot of negative connotations in the media around people who do it that way too. You're considered a hobbyist, not a real startup, because a real entrepreneur quits their jobs. But if you look at the actual data, the real entrepreneur doesn't quit their job until their enterprise is earning revenue or they can get funded. And that sometimes takes 3 to 4 years, and it can be very discouraging. So I think if I had to sort of quantify an entrepreneur as having one thing the most, it's just grit. And maybe second to that would be just an unhealthy obsession with making it happen, because it's really less about passion and more about hanging in despite a lot of pressure to quit from people who matter to you very much, a lot of pressure to quit from the media because you're already a failure if you don't start out of the gate having the money. If every entrepreneur waited until the perfect moment to start their company and get a startup off the ground, we'd have no innovation. So
you've used the word startup several times, and I think some people talk about, well, let's start a business. What does it mean to be a startup? What is a startup?
Startup is very different from a company. Startup runs at high risk because they haven't proven their product market fit yet, and they have no resources. At best, the limited resources are the people who come together to start the enterprise. So the difference between a startup and starting a company or starting a business is that you go through a period of time, and that period of time may go from 6 months to 12 months to 4 years, depending on how much time you can commit to the effort of really trying to discover who your market is and whether or not what you want to bring to market fits with that market. And it's a constant adjustment, and you're doing it again with limited to no resources. You're not going to the bank and getting a loan. You're maybe after a certain fashion, if you've demonstrated through engaging with target customers that your idea is something that could sell, you might ask family and friends, you might dip into savings or max out some credit cards, but you have not proven yourself in the market yet. So a startup operates at high risk under great uncertainty until they're no longer operating under as much uncertainty, but they might still have some risk.
So it starts with an idea.
So it starts with an idea, and then you have to prove that idea without actually building out a full company first. And there's an entire methodology around this now called Lean Startup, and we teach that here at Germana, the tools of the trade, if you will. And it's very different from what starting a business used to look like. The first time I started a business, I thought I had a great idea, I spent some time and resources, and I went into the market, and I got lucky because there were people who wanted what I was doing. I wasn't selling a product, I was selling a service. But in this day and age, even that can be a very risky proposition. If for no other reason, then there might be 10 million other people doing exactly what you're doing who've already gobbled up market space. So now you find yourself in a very unhealthy position of having to spend a lot of money to outmarket them, and you don't have a $25 million marketing budget. Mm-hmm. So you do things along the way in very small pieces. You run these little experiments, hopefully with real people and potential customers, to learn how to differentiate what you're bringing to market in a way that will get market share for you. And that's very different thinking than 15, 20 years ago. It was, I have a great idea, I'm going to build this great idea, and then I'm going to bring it to market, and I'm going to become a billionaire. But that typically doesn't happen.
It seems like the smart way to do it.
Yeah. So going at it iteratively and taking small things and testing them in the market first at the least amount of expense is usually a much safer way to go, and you're not guaranteed success. Right? Most startups fail. I think less than 3% of startups succeed. So you have to be willing to fail and keep going. That's another thing that makes an entrepreneur different than somebody who wants to start a business, You accept failure, but you don't let it stop you. That's not always easy, because it's easier to give up, especially when there are a lot of pressures all around you to, A, not fail when you do, just to give it up and walk away from it and act like it never happened.
Well, and if it's not that idea, perhaps a variation on the idea.
Or something totally different. I think the thing about entrepreneurs is that while they might have one that they're particularly passionate about and zealous about bringing to market, if that fails, the good entrepreneurs learn from it. They sort of run due diligence on their own process that they went through to get to failure. And if they don't riff on that existing idea or that initial idea, they have another one. But they go about how they execute against that idea differently. At the end of the day, entrepreneurship, successful entrepreneurs launch successful startups because they figure out how to execute. And that formula for execution is different. It's different not only every time and with every idea, but it continually evolves even when you leave the startup stage and you become a company. You have to constantly be evolving and constantly executing against what you've learned, either what you're doing right or what you're doing wrong. It's more important to learn what you're doing wrong and to learn it quickly. We talk about failing fast. It was interesting, I think Steve Jobs was talking about when he got fired from Apple, and he talked about he had this, I think, 3-month period where he just felt terrible and he was depressed and he was upset, he was angry, how could he get fired from his own company? And then he went off and decided to do something that was equally passionate to him, and he founded Pixar, right? And revolutionized animated movies. And I think that is a hallmark of the entrepreneurial spirit, that you do have, you take it personally, but you don't let it keep you down.
Failure is okay.
Failure has to be okay, or you never achieve. In fact, it's the failures that you learn from. You don't want to always fail, right? We hear a lot about it's okay to fail, and it is, but at some point you have to succeed. And so it's knowing, I think the difference is really executing on what you learn, so that you're not failing the same way every time. Because if you're failing the same way every time, you probably don't have what it takes to be an entrepreneur and to launch a startup. You are probably not really able to separate yourself from the idea, from the execution, to create that objectivity that you need. And that is really, in my opinion, a formula for never getting off the ground. And it's a formula for madness, right? It's massively frustrating. Which is why it's really important to have a community of people around you who understand what you're going through, what you're trying to do, and can be a sounding board. Because it's really easy to get tunnel vision and just be locked into your own view if you don't have that community around you, who will set you straight.
How does one get started?
I think the best thing to do is to look in your community for other people like you, because again, it's about the execution, ultimately, not about the idea. So here in the Germana region, we have a lot of meetups for founders, for people who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur but don't really know what it's like. These are risk-free events. We do open coffee. Our local startup community, Fed Exchange, has a whole calendar of events that we do. We do workshops here at Germana. We also have startup weekend events, so you can come for one whole weekend and try on your entrepreneur and see how it feels without having to commit more than the cost of a ticket for the event, which is pretty cheap. And I think that you have to you can use meetup.com and Facebook sites, but you want to find other entrepreneurs, other founders. You want to find resources that you don't yourself possess. So if you're a business person and you need coders, look for meetups in your area where there are coders who can code on the web or in mobile environments. Look at your local chamber for other businesses that are like yours, and meet with these people, get to know the actual business owners, and find out, spend $15 on some coffee and some pastries and talk to them. I think the most important thing an entrepreneur can do is seek out other human beings and have a coffee and a chat, because most entrepreneurs are very willing, over coffee or beer, to share what they've learned so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. You're free to make your own.
Well, thank you, Christine. Christine is one of our faculty members here in our entrepreneurship series and one of our hosts here at Germana for Startup Weekend. So if you want information about resources, meetups, classes, workshops, Startup Weekend, call Germana, 540-891-3000. 3012.